Some news just out on Tesla. The U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has opened a probe of Tesla's Autopilot function. The regulator says that the investigation will assess technologies and methods that are used to monitor, assist, and enforce the driver's engagement. Because remember, Tesla's is a little different than what you see from GM and some of the others, where they have to make sure their hands are always on the wheel.
Huh? With GM and others, you don't have to have your hand on the wheel? I'm confused. Let's hear that again.
Tesla's is a little different than what you see from GM and some of the others, where they have to make sure their hands are always on the wheel.
Now, I love Becky, but she's way too smart to fall into this Phil LeBeau, Tim Seymour trap of Tesla's bad and GM and Ford are good. Honestly, none of these subject matter experts on CNBC have ever driven a Tesla. Furthermore, they have never driven a Tesla in full self-driving. Yes, I am on YouTube. Yes, I own a Tesla, a Model 3. I've had it for almost 3 years now. And yes, I have the full self-driving package that I paid $7,000 for. And I can tell you, without a doubt, when I engage Autopilot, or the full self-driving mode, level 2 mode of my Tesla, about every 20 seconds, the screen turns blue and flashes at me, making me turn and put pressure on the steering wheel.
Now you're probably all wondering what happens when you don't hold the steering wheel. So if you fall asleep, if you are super distracted, what happens? Well, don't do it. Pay attention at all times. But if you must know, I did do a little test where I was driving on autopilot and I did not hold the steering wheel. And this is after the car flashed at me multiple times, giving me multiple warnings and reminders. So the car was beeping. Before that, I had my music on. And when it asked me to hold the steering wheel and it was flashing blue, I didn't. And finally, the music turned off. There was beeping in the car. The car automatically slowed down. The hazard lights came on. I was so surprised at the hazard lights coming on, but actually, now that I think about it, that is a really good idea. Another consideration is that once you get this warning signal, I was notified that I could no longer use Autopilot again on this trip, which is probably a really smart idea on Tesla's part, because if you're ignoring all the flashing and beeping and all the warning signs and you're just not flat out not paying attention, you should not be allowed to use Autopilot again. And if you want to use Autopilot again, you will have to bring the car to a complete stop. I think you have to shut it off and then you can use it again. And to clarify, this doesn't mean you can't drive your car. It just means Autopilot will not work for the remainder of your drive.
Also, in the latest update in the beta version, it has activated the camera in the cockpit to actually look at driver's attention. My Tesla is a 2018. That means Tesla has had a camera in my vehicle for 3 solid years, just like the other Super Cruise from GM or any other assisted driving software that makes the driver be aware. We really need these influencers on the networks to educate themselves when it comes to Tesla and the existing safety features. Tesla is the safest vehicle made in the world and the #1 safety rating out of all vehicles, period.
Meanwhile, let's turn to Tesla. Shares are dropping this morning as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration opens a formal probe into the company's Autopilot system. CNBC.com's Laura Kolodny is with us on this story. Laura, great to have you with us. I wonder, is this a Tesla problem, a self-driving tech problem, or both? I mean, the system is programmed so that it doesn't always identify these emergency vehicles or stationary objects because it needs to avoid things that are on the sides of the roads, right?
Right. So the probe has to do with Tesla's ADAS system, which is not self-driving. It's called a level 2 system, driver assistance, and how it responds to these police or other first respond vehicles on the side of the road. There have been 11 incidents where NHTSA determined autopilot or traffic aware cruise control were being used and may have been a factor. Now they're going to figure out whether there's a safety defect in Tesla's autopilot.
A safety defect in their autopilot. The defect is with the human driver, which is the weakest link. Now, it's very, very unfortunate that there was 11 incidents that happened over like a 7-year period of span. They're going all the way back to 2014, and one fatality out of the billions of miles logged by Tesla in Autopilot. Billions with a B. 11 crashes. Absolutely minuscule. Tesla is proven to be 9 times safer on Autopilot than having a human driver in control behind the wheel.
So, Laura, if it does lead to a recall, which could be the eventual outcome, correct? Do you think it would be a software recall like the one we saw in China, which was kind of called a soft recall because the vehicles didn't actually have to go in? And in that case, Tesla shares largely shrugged off the recall.
That is what happened in China. That was a massive Autopilot safety recall that affected, hundreds of thousands of vehicles, but it was mostly done through over-the-air software updates. That may be a possibility here. One difference here is that the recall goes back to all the SXY3 vehicles from 2014 on, and some of those have different hardware. Recently, Tesla removed radar from its vehicles, these radar sensors that are part of Autopilot and its more advanced FSD level 2 system. So it's not clear how many updates could be delivered through over-the-air software pushes.
Laura, one thing we're still looking for is a response. Any word on how or when that might be coming?
These things can actually take a really long time. And usually with a preliminary investigation like this, if it does seem like there might be a mandatory recall, the automakers will just go ahead and do a voluntary recall.
Laura, I think, what about a response from Tesla itself? I know we're watching Elon Musk's Twitter handle, and usually he responds because they sort of disassembled their media arm, right?
I don't know. I mean, Joe Rogan episodes don't book themselves. They have a non-traditional approach to media relations. I wouldn't expect the company to speak on this. They have a history of boasting about their safety record, but there aren't, third-party. They don't have third-party entities that are reviewing all their data. There's so many questions. What they will probably do at AI Day coming up is remind everybody how advanced their systems are, how they have a different approach than everyone else, and the fact that they can update the entire fleet of vehicles with these software updates, this sort of agile software development approach. Tesla pushes that. They tell investors not to worry. And I think we might see investors get over this pretty quickly.
Finally, we agree on a point. I, as a stockholder, and I don't think other stockholders are going to give two craps about the 5% dip in the stock today. AI Day is this Thursday. This FUD will all be gone within 72 hours, and the stock will recover.
More seriously, there's a reputational hit, like I said, because Tesla pushes safety as a big selling point. And, there might be other regulatory responses. Like in Germany, the regulators told them, hey, you can put these products out, but you can't market them as full self-driving or autopilot. You have to change the language around this. Right. And I've always wondered if something like that may happen here in the States, if too many people are using them and overestimating the capability of the systems.
Well, with that kind of mindset and thinking, then when I was flying a Turbo Cessna 182 earlier today, and I activated my Garmin Autopilot with that analogy and that type of thinking, if I struck one of the Rocky Mountains with my small single-engine aircraft using Autopilot, then that should be recalled by Garmin and Cessna, right? Because I crashed using Autopilot. No, I'm the pilot in command. I'm in charge of the aircraft. It's my job to make sure that the autopilot is doing what I expect it to do. No difference between the driver behind a vehicle using a level 2 driver-assisted safety device, or even if it was level 5 and it's supposed to do everything. The pilot in control, or in this case, driver in control, is 100% responsible for that 3,000-pound missile going down the ribbon of death. As many years spent in traffic enforcement on the highway, it's why we call it the ribbon of death, is extremely dangerous. I've been hit on the highway at least 3 separate times as a police officer in my 25-plus year career. It's incredibly dangerous out there. It's very, very sad that inattentive drivers caused serious bodily injury and death in these 11 different cases. You got to pull your heads out their butts and pay attention to where they're driving.